You read the title. It's time for a top 10 ranking. In order of importance, here's what a good boss should aspire to do. 1. Allow you to respond in real time to each of his attacks. 2. Minimize randomness. 3. Feel intuitive. 4. Have minimal downtime. And 5. Achieve difficulty without sacrificing fairness. That also means I'm only talking about the fight itself, lore and thematic components excluded. With that said, I'm Holland, and these are the top 10 boss fights in Hollow Knight. Number 10. Soul Master. Although not entirely ideal for the purposes of this ranking, bosses with multiple versions will be grouped together. So this placement also includes Soul Tyrant. I've always been really fond of Soul Master, but lately, although I still enjoy the boss fight, I've been surprised to find it a lot less engaging than I remember. The main thing I love about Soul Master is how fairly he plays, mainly due to the way he teleports around the screen, keeping him from accidentally running into you like a ton of other bosses do. His attacks are intuitive but quite simple, but as you'll see throughout the video, I value complexity far less than others. That's about where my compliments for Soul Master end. As for negatives, one thing I've never liked is the randomness tied to the orb spawning in the final phase. I'm generally a lot fonder of consistency, and given the hectic nature of this final phase, I just don't like how wide the range is between easy and hard patterns. Another element of RNG I don't like is where Soul Tyrant teleports to during his orb attack. Since he moves much faster than Soul Master, if Soul Tyrant decides to teleport far away from you before firing an orb, you won't be able to make it to him before he teleports away. This can make for annoying downtime where you're basically unable to interact with the boss. Speaking of downtime, that's my last major gripe with Soul Master and Soul Tyrant in particular. I don't mind it too much, and I used to mind it even less, but as I've become more comfortable with the game, I've begun to really dislike it when a boss leaves the arena. Simply because that means there's often nothing for you to do but wait for his return. Okay, so all that makes it sound like I hate the boss, which is really not the case. I do like Soul Master and Soul Tyrant, but given how many great bosses there are in this game, I sadly have to place them last. Number 9. Watcher Knights. Oh, how it pains me not to be able to put this fight higher on the list. In fact, during earlier drafts of this ranking, the Watcher Knights were, I think, 4th or 5th place. To put it simply, the boss has too many flaws. There's high pattern RNG, meaning one attack, the slash, is way easier to respond to than any of the rolls. So you can get 3 slashes in a row or 3 rolls in a row, all highly dependent on luck. Moreover, being rolled from outside the screen can feel almost impossible to respond to and requires you to always keep an eye on both watchers, which feels unnatural and can be hard to do. Thirdly, when the boss is too close to a wall and rolls into it, he'll bounce back with vicious force. This might be predictable based on the distance he travels before hitting the wall, but damn if it doesn't feel unintuitive to avoid. Then we have the fact that without Shadow Dash, rolling patterns become even more luck-based. When one boss bounces and the other rolls straight, you can get immensely screwed unless you're able to gain invincibility frames. I don't have a problem with a fight being harder without a specific ability, unless there's this much RNG involved. And finally, the fake out rolling on the spot can make you accidentally dash into one of the watchers since you thought he was going to roll past you. Technically avoidable, but given that it's so unintuitive and up to luck, I just don't like it. I spent a lot of time trying to beat this boss charmless on Radiant, and once I finally did, I kind of realized that most of the time I spent just using Desolate Dive to avoid having to deal with all of the randomness. Listen, I really enjoy fighting the Watchers one-on-one, but once there are 2 of them, my enjoyment starts to rapidly decline, especially on Radiant, where every result of a poor dice roll and every unintuitive attack is felt so much more strongly. We'll see an example of what I think is a way better duo fight later on, but for now, you might think I'm being overly harsh against some of these bosses, That's because I value fairness so highly. And with all of that said, I still like the Watcher Knights quite a lot. They don't suffer from the repositioning problem, and with good soul management, have almost zero downtime. So if you get some benevolent pattern RNG and can take a few hits, it's an immensely enjoyable experience. Number 8. Grim. I'm not known for my controversial takes, so this might come as a shock to you, but I've always thought Grim and Nightmare King were somewhat overrated. You know, cause what's up with this balloon phase? Why does there have to be so much luck involved? And why can't you hit him with your nail? And on the topic of downtime, where is Nightmare King Grim? Where is he? Why am I dodging spikes while waiting for him to return to the damn arena? I'm not saying that the Grim fights are bad, not at all. I'm just not as fond of them as most people appear to be. Looking past the balloon phase, the boss has a few major advantages. It's fair, doesn't suffer from the repositioning problem, and is also quite intuitive. I should say actually, for those of you who don't know what the repositioning problem is, go watch one of these videos about it. That'll get you in the know. It's basically what makes Lost Kin so terrifying on Radiant. If the balloon phase had some set patterns for the fireballs, and if Nightmare King had more health but didn't leave the arena quite as often, I'd probably put this boss higher on the list. Because it is a really good fight, even if it did take me almost 5 minutes straight to beat Charmless on Radiant. It achieves difficulty without relying on cheap tactics like unintuitive or unreactive attacks, and I like that. I appreciate that a lot actually. So props to Grim and congrats on the spot. Number 7. Nail Sage Sly. I find it pretty funny that none of the bosses so far have suffered from the repositioning problem. Well, that's about to change because the next 5 bosses do, although they all make up for it in different ways. In Sly's case, he's pretty good about jumping away from you rather than into you. His fight is quite unintuitive and was really difficult for me to get the hang of when I first encountered him. But once you do, it's a thrilling back and forth with short reaction windows and fun attacks to dodge. So the only thing that drags Sly down for me is the fact that you can't respond in real time to all of his attacks and that he's quite unintuitive. Otherwise, a wonderfully challenging encounter which, although quite chess-like in the way you have to each take your turns, never feels like it suffers from excessive downtime. Number 6. Paintmaster Shio. I'll tell you why it's important to actually test out your theories in practice before you make a video like this. Shio wasn't originally going to be part of this video, but then I went ahead and challenged myself to beat all of my favorite bosses on Radiant without any charms, and that really put things into perspective. When you're stuck fighting the same boss again and again and again, and any damage kills you, it starts to become really apparent what feels like your fault and what feels like you were treated unfairly by the boss. At least it does to me. Suffice it to say that a lot of bosses started dropping down this list for being immensely frustrating to go up against on Radiant. And one of the bosses who started to climb for the very opposite reason was Shio. Well, Shio does have his own problems with unfairness, mainly the fact that he does commit the repositioning problem. Although it should be said that his jumps are quite sluggish, which does help to alleviate the problem to some extent. The only other unfair thing he's able to do is to use the yellow attack outside your field of view, which can catch you off guard, but that's really it. The fight is simple, but overall I'd say it's quite fair. I used to find it frustrating that he seemed to sometimes just strike me out of nowhere until I realized that his basic animation set always contains the blue brush color, meaning you should always be prepared that he'll perform that attack. Perhaps it is still impossible to avoid without taking precautions, but it's a huge benefit to know that he's always ready to perform the blue attack. Otherwise, just a simple and fun encounter. And again, I don't value complexity nearly as highly as a lot of other players, so simplicity and fairness are really all I need. Number 5. Broken Vessel. Man, knowing Holland, you wouldn't expect him to place the prime offender of the repositioning problem 5th place on his boss ranking. That's like nominating a criminal for outstanding citizenship. Well, this criminal is indeed an outstanding citizen, because in all other ways than having a poorly designed jump, he's a wonderfully designed boss. In the original draft, Broken Vessel ranked number 10, but throughout testing I found him to be much less frustrating than some of the other bosses, like Watcher Knights, which I definitely thought I would have a better time against than Broken Vessel. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because Broken Vessel is less reliant on RNG than other bosses. Maybe it's because you can constantly be hitting him. In fact, that last part definitely has something to do with why I like him so much. He's just such a dynamic opponent, which basically means he can be knocked around like a pinball, but that's fun. He's simple and fun. Also, his parry radius is quite generous. Fun. So, what are the problems? Well, reprop obviously, and then secondly, how random the infected balloon spawns are. Especially when needing to heal, where those critters spawn matters quite a lot. But to steal a great point by Fireborn, the balloons really help to make the fight feel absolutely devoid of downtime. You always have something to do. So despite committing the notorious repositioning problem, Broken Vessel and Lost Kin are some of my absolute favorite fights. Number 4. Oro and Mato. Remember when I was talking about there being a better duo fight than Watcher Knights? Well, I was talking about Oro and Mato. Man, Team Cherry really nailed almost all of the bosses from the Godhome expansion. Oro and Mato is another great fight, and although I'd venture to guess that a lot of you would agree with that, you might be surprised to see it this high up. Well, referring back to the original list of criteria, the boss fulfills all of them. It's fair but difficult, intuitive, has low RNG and minimal downtime. Perhaps one of the reasons why my rankings will look a bit unusual is, again, because I really truly value fairness above all. Fairness to me is about being able to respond in real time to an intuitive attack. It's about having to be good at the fight rather than lucky. And if the boss can give me such an experience, I care a lot less about the complexity of the fight. Sure, complexity can make for a more interesting encounter, and difficulty in general I find quite important, although I'm not sure to what extent those two are related. I like Hollow Knight because I like the bare fundamentals, dodging and attacking. So when Oro's attacks look like this, I'm satisfied. He gives me time to respond and opportunities for counterattacking. Throw in a cheeky nail art here and there to spice up the fight, and so long as I get proper time to respond and a chance to retaliate, I'm all set. Now the important question is, how enjoyable is the fight once Mato arrives? Putting aside how cool this moment is thematically, because that's not what this list is about, is the duo fight itself well put together? My answer is yes. Despite a few rough edges, I find the scuffle against Oro and Mato very enjoyable. And that's because it plays a lot differently than Watcher Knights. The way I'd put it is that Oro and Mato fight as one entity. Basically, either one of them is performing a move while the other stands still, or they're attacking you in tandem. Unlike Watcher Knights, which seem to function like completely independent entities. When the brothers attack you, although there are two of them, it feels like you're responding to a single attack. Mostly, you'll be standing on the far edge of the arena fighting one of them, which can get a bit uncomfortably claustrophobic. But if you go in between the brothers, they'll react to you and perform an attack in unison. This is far from perfectly executed, but it's a really cool attempt at alleviating the fundamental flaw with duo fights. Which is that there's just too much randomness involved when two separate entities have to take their turns independently. Oro and Mato do suffer from one problem that the Watcher Knights also have, which is being unable to see when one of them is charging up an attack off screen. But other than that, the only other issue I've had with the team aspect of the fight is that when performing a duo attack, the brothers can sometimes strike through each other and out the other end, getting you hit through the back of one of them. Although I would say this problem is quite minor. The last thing I'll comment on before moving on is Oro and Mato in relationship to repositioning. And this here is very interesting. Because while both of them can jump upwards and hit you, they actually have a pretty decent telegraph before doing so, allowing you time to respond. Hooray! I guess they must have watched my videos on the repositioning problem. Kudos to you, Nailmasters. Number 3. Pure Vessel. We're now entering the top 3, and I should preface this specific ranking by noting how hard it was to judge the ordering of these last few bosses. Since I first beat Pure Vessel, I'd always imagined he'd take the number 1 spot for me as the best fight in the game, but alas, here we are. Oh yeah, and the Hollow Knight also technically shares this spot with Pure Vessel, although I do think the two are very different fights. Pure Vessel being by far my favorite. I'll start by telling you why I didn't give him the top spot. Pure Vessel is probably the most engaging and intimidating boss in the entire game, and most of his attacks are genuinely so fun to dodge and counter. My current favorite is the triple slash because parrying that attack with a downward strike makes me feel so indescribably cool. But it's not just that attack, it's countering the lunge, dashing through the soul daggers, pogoing him during the pillar attack, and just about reaching him when he uses void tendrils. However, all of the coolness aside, when you have a boss as difficult and as complex as Pure Vessel, avoiding putting the player in unfair situations becomes so much more important. And, well, that's where he falls slightly short of the ideal. If Pure Vessel always felt fair and intuitive, he would no doubt take the number 1 spot on this list, but sadly he doesn't, and here are some reasons why. 1. When pogoing Pure Vessel during the pillar attack, he may on rare occasions teleport on top of your head. He only does this if he wants to perform the same attack twice, making an otherwise super cool counterattack unreliable. 2. Pure Vessel may sometimes perform an attack outside your range of vision, and if it's something like the lunge or the soul daggers, this can lead to a situation that feels impossible to react to. 3. The focus attack, while thematically very impressive, isn't that interesting to respond to, and has terrible RNG when trying to heal against the boss, given the secondary circles can either spawn on top of you or not, based purely on luck. And finally, Pure Vessel's hitbox can be hard to understand. Given that it's tough to know exactly where it is, you may get hit by contact damage when he staggers, or you may simply have a tougher time landing your pogos. Don't get me wrong, I love Pure Vessel, but after spending hours trying to beat him on Radiant without charms, despite the final run being about half as long as Nightmare King Grim, I have to knock his position on this list down a notch. I wish he were a little more intuitive and a little less frustrating. Yet nonetheless, he remains one of the best bosses in the entire game, and probably the coolest. Number 2. Mantis Lords. Mantis Lords, and by extension the even more impressive Sisters of Battle, is a stunning work of game design genius. I love this fight, not only because it's so incredibly fun and engaging, but also because it's the perfect example of a difficult fight that is 1. Not very complex, and 2. Doesn't rely on repositioning to create a challenge. Sisters of Battle in particular is a prime counter to the idea that bad repositioning has to exist in order to make fights not feel too easy. The Sisters of Battle offer endless action with little respite, and when you're fighting all 3 of them at the same time, dodging out of the way and responding after each attack, they make for an absolutely breathtaking experience. What makes this even more impressive is how reliant on luck the fight actually is, but without that ever feeling like an issue. I think that's because most of the patterns are pretty equal in difficulty, making the RNG serve almost exclusively as a source of novelty rather than frustration. The only reason why this boss isn't at the very top is that, similar to Pure Vessel, it does have some moderately glaring flaws, so here they are. 1. As pointed out by the great Joseph Anderson, the pacing of both versions of the fight is actually quite off. Both start out against a single Mantis, which is fine for the original but can feel a little slow on the rematch. But more importantly, once you engage with the proper fight, as soon as you slay one of the lords, the fight gets easier. As Anderson points out, given how exciting the match is at its peak and how it kind of fades out near the end, all of the lords should ideally share a health pool, which would make the fight go from climax to resolution in much more rapid and appropriate fashion. 2. The lords are actually able to spawn inside of you. This can happen if you go too high up into the arena or just by standing too close to the edge. Especially sad because this is the only time the boss acts unfairly. Otherwise, it's probably the fairest boss in the entire game. 3. Since the Mantis Lords do teleport outside the arena between each attack, they can create a bit of downtime. It's not a huge issue, and if you're fighting all 3 at once, it's absolutely not a problem, but especially when going up against just one of them at the start or near the end of the fight, it can feel a bit slow. Given how highly I value fairness, it's clear why this fight is so high up on the list. But the fight isn't just fair, it's thrilling, it's exciting, and in the case of the Sisters of Battle, it's an absolute roller coaster. And one of the best experiences I have playing Hollow Knight. Now, I think you've probably been able to guess by now what boss scores the top placement on this list. I've done an episode of Behind the Boss on it, and it's a bit of a controversial pick, but I think it's only reasonable to say that this is indeed one of the best bosses in the entire game, if not the absolute best. Number 1. Traitor Lord. Not what you expected? Well, too bad, because I'll damn well die on this hill. Well, I shouldn't quite say that. I'm somewhat torn between all of these placements, and it's entirely possible that Mantis Lords or Pure Vessel could take this top spot for me. And yet this placement wasn't made on a whim, so hear me out before you storm down into the comments and let me know how wrong I am. Traitor Lord has one flaw, and that's the fact that due to a bug, he can sometimes just walk straight into you. But in this video, I explain how that bug works and how it can be mitigated. And although it still adds an element of unintuitiveness and luck to the fight that I'd rather do without, understanding how to avoid getting run into makes the fight so much more fun. Traitor Lord has no downtime. He has 2 attacks that are about equally hard to dodge and respond to. There are a myriad of ways to engage with him, and given you understand his use of walk storage, he plays really fairly. And remember, I value fairness over, well, probably over anything else in this game. I hate feeling cheated, and I love a good back and forth between me and the boss. So you might think Traitor Lord is way too simple to be the best boss in the game, and I can totally understand that. But complexity isn't a criterion on this list, because although bosses can definitely get too simple, I generally don't value it that much. I'm incredibly fond of Hollow Knight's combat system, and that's why I enjoy dodging Traitor Lord and retaliating. Dodge, retaliate for hours on end. That's what I love about this game. And although I'm sure these placements will change for me over time, for now, Traitor Lord takes the top spot. And I'm thrilled you made it all the way to the end. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. Before you criticize me down below, remember that the criteria I use to make these judgments might not be the same that you'd use when determining what boss you like the best. But feel free to share your thoughts and let me know if I missed some important considerations. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd love to hear if you'd want me to make another list on the worst bosses in the game. But until then, I'm Holland, and I hope you have a wonderful day.